Solari.com is the website. Her name is Catherine Austin Fitz. She was one of the top people at HUD, managing director and member of the board of Wall Street firm Dillon, Reed & Co. She's designed and closed over $25 billion of transactions and investments to date and has led portfolio strategy for $300 billion of financial assets and liabilities. And we're just really honored to have her with us. Okay, Catherine, we ran into that break, and you were breaking down the centralization team versus the decentralization team, or team tyranny versus team liberty. There's so many facets in this. How far along is this new form of world government? Describe some of that world government to us, and then get into whatever subjects you want to cover. Solutions, how you think people can individually protect themselves, strategies for states and counties.
Okay, well, let me jump back for a second to
the red button.
History of what I call the black budget, because you really need to understand the history of this. People don't understand how could it have gotten so bad and me not notice. What happened, Alex, was in 1947 and 1949, we passed the National Security Act and the CIA Act, and those two acts in combination allowed money to be clawed out of the federal government and federal budget and spent in non-transparent ways. So we created a secret way of funding very big projects through the governmental mechanism. Now, remember, they can borrow as much money as they want. And then something else happened, because if you go back and you look at the history of financial fraud and the kind of corruption we're looking at, and you interview or you research and you read the people sort of dealing with it, it all comes back to a point after World War II where literally the government lost control of the technology. We had the most powerful, secretive, black technology in the world, including some that we brought over from the Nazis. And literally, we've created this funding mechanism that paid corporations to control and manage technology. And a lot of what we're dealing with goes back to the fact that we've had since then 50 to 60 years of incredible non-transparent governmental flows going into basically corporate-controlled technology that many of us don't understand. And when you say, well, how can the military force countries all around the world to take paper that keeps going down in value? It all comes back, as you probably note, a lot of the invisible weaponry, the satellite systems, and all this incredible technology that we don't understand and know about. Does that make any sense?
I mean, they brag that they're really 30 years advanced, and they've got satellites where they can radiate somebody from space. I mean, we have a highly advanced technocracy that has walled itself off in military reservations, private corporate reservations, as you know, is heading up a big company that developed a lot of financial software systems. And they've rolled out the internet systems, the banking systems, the cashless systems that have now just been adopted. It's like poisoning the well, poisoning the water hole, and the deer come to it and drink and then go off and die and don't even know what killed them.
Right.
It's just like all the technology to track and control us is built into the iPhone or the cell phone. We just accept it, and we're now basically like savages in this 21st century Buck Rogers system, not even knowing what we're part of. And the elite, as Bill Joy wrote in the April issue in 2000 in Wired magazine, the elite don't need us anymore. Why the future doesn't need us?
Well, it's worse than that. Not only do they not need us, but we've become very expensive. I mean, let's just look at the numbers in the United States. In the United States, if you look at the national debt before the bank bailouts, each American had about $38,000 of national debt. If you count up the Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid and other contingent liabilities, and you say, what's the present value of those contingent liabilities, it's about $138,000, so more than, say, 4 times the current national debt. And so we've literally, in one sense, the baby boomers have reached a point where we're worth more dead than alive. Just looking at the numbers.
So if they succeed with this technological extermination grid that the White House science czar talks about, if all the population manipulation and reduction we've seen was just testing, what is the end game? I mean, if they are able to carry this out, how do you see it unfolding?
Well, frankly, I don't think they're going to be able to carry it out. I mean, I'm not saying they're not going to try, but it's a very big planet. What all of us need to understand is, in a world where let's just take as an assumption that we can be irradiated by a satellite, by invisible weaponry from space. How do you push back against something that is that ubiquitous, both in terms of ability to force or ability to manipulate, whether it's through the media, your iPhone, or whatever? How do you do it? And if you look back through history, what you will see is where, John Adams said the revolution was not the war, the revolution was in the hearts and the minds of the people. And Alex, we're talking about a point of view and a way of being which is unbelievably black. And if there's one thing I know about people are fundamentally healthy and people are fundamentally grounded, and they just do not go along with this kind of blackness. Now, it can do incredible harm on the way, but you're talking about ultimately a government that doesn't have what I call the Chinese call the mandate of heaven. It's something that's based on a culture which is too perverted, too unhealthy, and too lacking in the kind of open transparency, and it sits in its own bell jar.
So you're saying there's going to be a revolution even within the control system and the elite not having the stomach to carry all this out. The problem is, and correct me if I'm wrong, if that's not what you mean by that, or this revolution in the mind, and I agree with you, that's happening as members of the mid-level establishment really figure out, my God, this really is a giant extermination system, then we see them racing to go to full robotic aircraft, full robotic tanks, full remote control systems where you have robotic factories that manufacture and that engage in the upkeep of the systems, and then it's all deployed. Basically, a Terminator Skynet system is what they're building, but it's controlled by humans.
Right, but you cannot run a large operation or enterprise, let alone a world government, on force. It has to have some kind of moral authority. It has to have some kind of vision and values that inspire its members to be loyal. Force is not enough.
And so that's why they stage terror attacks and the elite play the part of the victim. It depends on which one, because remember that the elites are fighting. What you've got is you've got a situation where because the elite is a pretty big group, but many of these people are prisoners of a system. In other words, they're part of what I call the central banking warfare model. And that model, Alex, the important thing to understand about that model is to date it's worked. I mean, I'll give you an example. In the summer of 2000, that was a busy summer, I was at a revival for Christian women in Atlanta. T.D. Jakes from Dallas, your state, had rented the Georgia Dome and had Women Thou Art Loosed. And I was sitting there with 100,000 African-American women, and I was taking a spiritual warfare course with a pastor, and I was there with a church. And this particular pastor had worked at DEA. And T.D. Jakes brought George W. Bush in by monitor, and the whole crowd jumped up cheering for George W. Bush, including this pastor. When it was over, what I hadn't explained earlier in my background was I ended up in very serious litigation with the federal government that went on for years and years and years. And, I always say I played Will Smith. If you've ever you've seen the movie Enemy of the State, right? Yes.
Okay, well, I played Will Smith in real life. It just took me a lot longer to find Gene Hackman. Anyway, so this minister stood up and cheered, and after it was over, I said, Patricia, I lost $6 million, and I almost lost my life trying to stop Clinton and Bush family narcotics trafficking, and you just jumped up and cheered for this guy. And she said, well, he's going to be the winner. And I said, so he's a winner and I'm a loser? And she said, yeah, that's right.
That's it. They feel like they're part of the power structure, even though it's going to destroy them.
Well, but here's the thing. We have 57% of households in America now, headed for 67%, are dependent on government money. In other words, I call it the tapeworm economy. It's like having a tapeworm. The tapeworm injects into you a chemical that makes you do what's good, eat what's good for the tapeworm, and so the tapeworm grows stronger and you grow weaker. Right now, the majority of us are practicing a philosophy of follow the tapeworm. All that needs to happen, Alex, if you could get a critical mass, say, the 100 monkey syndrome, if you could get 6 to 10% of the people saying, I'm not going to go along with this, I'm going to withdraw. Because you don't want to have a fight with them. You don't want to get in a fight with the satellites. You just want to say, something, I'm pulling my money out of your game because your game is shrinking. The problem with the centralization economically is it's shrinking the wealth. It's making a few people a little wealthier. But it's literally like if our body was in trauma, if you or I got hit by a car, our body was in trauma, the body would preserve the blood for the heart, the lungs, and the brains.